Hey there, Eurus here, and welcome to Community Life. Here we talk with the amazing humans from the community world about their life journeys and learn from each other. And today we have a conversation with Christian Ray Flores, a leader of the Tribe Church community in Austin, Texas, who has been a pastor for 25 years, a professional singer with a successful career in the 90s, an entrepreneur who co-founded the Third Drive venture development company, and an international man of mystery who lived in 4 continents and speaks 4 languages. So, welcome, Christian.
Thanks for having me, Yuri.
Super happy to finally talk to you and meet you. And I've read a lot about you, so I have so many questions. And let's start with this first one. So, how often do you do daddy dates or Father's Days with your daughters?
You found that somewhere on the internet, right? I think maybe once every couple of weeks, I have a daddy date with one of my kids. Yeah, I have 3 daughters. All of them are out of the house, and we just go to a restaurant, hang out, catch up, that sort of thing.
Do you plan them?
Not really, no. I think we sort of go by what's available, right? So I have a few moments and I can text them or call them and say, hey, do you have time now? Sometimes they're the ones who initiate it and, hey, let's meet up. Do you want to have lunch? And on average, it's sort of, I think it evens out at about once every 2 weeks.
What are one of the best daddy days that you had?
Daddy dates that I had, one of the best ones. Um, I love going to events together. I think the last one we did that I thought was fantastic was I took Vivi, my middle child, to a show. And I think it was, I don't remember. I went to a few shows that month, but it's like some friends of mine have a suite at the Moody Center, which is a concert hall, big concert hall, like a sports arena. So they have a suite. And I think we went to see like Buster Rhymes and Missy Elliott, like some classic hip hop artists. And she, Vivi specifically of the 3 is probably the most bougie ones, right? And so there's an open bar. You can go and have a meal before the show, and then you go and sit in the best seats in the house and watch an amazing show. And between the 3 artists that went back to back, you go back to the suite and hang out with cool people. I think that's probably the coolest one lately. But yeah.
How do you feel about those days?
You mean the 90s where the hip hop people were? Yeah,
I mean, like meeting and going on a dates with your daughters.
Oh, the dates. Got it.
Yeah.
I thought days. Uh, I think they're very special. I believe that you don't stop paying attention to especially if you have daughters. I have 3 daughters. Until they're married, I'm gonna date my daughters and show them what a real man does, and how they should be treated as special, unique, adored, loved. And I think that's a very special thing that a father can have with a daughter. Um, and it sort of shows that it's almost like models, hey, here's what a good date looks like, so they don't forget. They have high standards.
Yeah,
As you,
exactly. I was meaning to say that you really make high standards for them
I
right
do,
now.
I do. So if you're a loser boy trying to date my daughter, it's not going to go well, unfortunately.
Sorry, no loser boys. And what will happen after they will marry?
I think we're gonna probably see each other a little bit less because they need to be with their husband. But I think the daddy date thing is gonna continue probably a little bit more infrequently. That's sort of my prediction. Also, a lot of it obviously depends on where they move. All 3 of them are now in Austin, Texas with me, so they're all between 10 minutes away and 45 minutes away. So we can always make something happen. We still do we travel together every year somewhere.
Hmm.
So we pick a place and we go places. So
Who
um,
usually picks a place?
I think it's Deb and I, my wife and I. We pick a place and we say, hey, do you want to come with us? And I don't think they say no very often.
What might be the reason of them saying no?
Probably conflict at work.
Got it.
That's it. Yeah.
Why did you choose homeschooling for your 2 youngest daughters?
Oh, that's a good question. we wanted to pull them out of the education industrial complex.
Mm.
That is the answer. The Especially the public education system, actually anywhere in the world, but in the US as well. It's really built around a very antiquated model where it was basically developed, I think it was developed by the Prussians in Germany
Mm.
to create sort of minimum viable professionals for the Industrial Revolution. So they literally replicated almost like a conveyor belt system.
Yeah.
This teacher teaches this teacher teaches that. It starts and ends with a bell. Have you ever thought about that for that reason? And it's really not an integrated way to teach knowledge and wisdom, right? And also, all these subjects are separate, right? Geography is separate from history, for example, which is separate from literature. And if you are teaching, if you want to teach people skills and a worldview, you have to integrate. How does geography integrate with history? How does history integrate with literature? How do the sciences fit in? So it's really developing a worldview. That's what I wanted for my kids, and the public school system didn't really offer that, and that's why we pulled them out. And we wanted to be around them. I think the other reason is that we wanted to be the main influence on how they're shaped.
Mm.
And so the public system, you delegate the formation of a young child to somebody who's not even a family member. And to me, I didn't like that. We have them for a very short period of time in the house, and we wanted to be around them all the time. We wanted to have the freedom to shape their spirituality, their worldview, and we want them to learn about the world experientially rather than theoretically.
Mm.
So, for example, if they're studying geography or studying natural sciences, I would rather take them to the beach in Malibu and explore the reefs there and the shells, and then write a report about it. If they're studying economics and, let's say, economic disparity in the world, I'd rather take them to Africa and have them walk in those villages where people live on under $2 a day and see subsistence existence of the poorest of the poor. And I would have them join me in a humanitarian trip where we
Mm.
serve them. I mean, that kind of education, it's experiential, it's not theoretical, it's immersive. So that's maybe a longer answer than you were looking for, but yeah, that's the answer.
How did they feel about being homeschooled?
Uh, you know, it- they felt good about it. Now they feel very good about it.
Mm.
At the time, when, homeschooling is hard, it's very demanding in the sense that it's actually more rigorous than public schooling.
Yeah.
They had to read whole books and write reports about it, not just sort of one page or one chapter. Um, so at times they did resent it in the sense that that romanticized view of high school that you see in Disney shows, right? Um, which is never real, actually. Um, it's just not. It's just a
Yeah.
romanticized thing. They would want that, I think, the sort of the broader, exciting world out there. But so we had some bumps again, in those things, and we would say, okay, both of them actually had the choice to go to high school once they reached high school after a certain level where we feel like, okay, you have the critical mass of worldview and education, and if you want to switch to public education, that's totally fine. So by the time that both of them reached that place,
Mm.
they didn't want to do it anymore. So so they were like, yeah, I think I'm going to be okay, and it's much more creative, more flexible. It's much more exciting. And I think both of them had a problem with getting up super early in the morning and going, with a bunch of other kids. And we're like, yeah, this is public school. It's no Disney show. And they were like, yeah, you know what? I think we're going to be fine sleeping in a little bit. And so they enjoyed that. And it really prepared them for college. So both of the younger ones, they are still in college. Both of them are. One is graduating in a few months, but both of them are exceptional students, like Dean's List, scholarships, straight A's.
Hmm.
They're just very equipped. They're better equipped than the normal kid that goes to college.
Are you a demanding parent?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think we are disciplinarians. I think we're really more about integrating and having sort of a deep relationship with them. So in that sense, no, if that's sort of what sometimes people think is like tiger mom type image, that's just not who we are, right? But we are demanding in the sense of high standards, work ethic. Yes, we are, and they're grateful, I think, because they have extremely good work ethic, both of them.
How to keep this boundary between being work demanding and still not kind of overcoming children boundaries?
Um, I don't know. I mean, you overstep. I don't think there's a clear boundary, to be honest with you. And it's really, I think it's a sliding boundary. That's probably the best word that comes to mind.
Hmm.
You you ask them to do things when they're little, they need to just obey. I told you this, you do what I tell you specifically. And then as they grow older, then you have to convince them over time that this is the right thing to do. And it's a sliding boundary. So it really is proportional to their level of maturity, to the natural evolution of who they are as human beings, how separate they feel from you, etc. Um, and because it's a sliding boundary, you're bound to overstep in both directions, actually. So they will overstep in how much they get away with, and we go, no, 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 you don't get away with it. And then we overstep in the amount of sort of assertiveness we can exercise on the kid, and we can apologize and say, yeah, I'm sorry, that was out of a line. I think you should make up your own mind about this particular thing. So it's I think it's really more of it's an art rather than a science, you know.
No. So let's start from the beginning. Tell me about your parents. Who are they?
My mom is Russian. My dad's Chilean. So it's a mixed family. My dad's an engineer. She actually has two higher educations. She's a teacher, French teacher, and she's a nurse. She's a professional nurse. So yeah, that's them. They've been they had we have a really good relationship with both. Unfortunately, they've been divorced for a long time since I was 14 years old. But I do have a very close relationship with both of them.
How did you feel when they divorced?
Oh, it was just earth-shattering. It devastated me. It was really, really bad. It actually shaped me, traumatized me more than some of the other stuff that I lived through that for most people that should be the big trauma. And I was a refugee at age 5. I've seen civil war. I've seen the fall of the Soviet Union. And I've seen really intense stuff on 3 different continents. But the divorce of my parents is the thing that affected me the most, I think. It was really bad.
What did you do back then as a teenager?
I just I think I decided internally that marriage is a good marriage doesn't exist.
Hmm.
That was sort of the big thing for me, is that I couldn't see any examples of a flourishing marriage around me at the time. Like no one I knew. And I saw a lot of divorce, cheating. Even if people stayed together, I saw they settled for an unhappy marriage rather than had a happy marriage. So I sort of made that conclusion that marriage is an illusion. It can never work, Inevitably things change or people change and it stops working. And that was sort of my big shift originally. And that changed, of course, over time.
At what moment did it change?
I met a Canadian missionary in Moscow. And at the time, I was I was basically at the peak of my first successful career. I've had several careers, but my first successful career was as a singer in the sort of post-Soviet space, right? All of that territory, 15 different countries. And I was literally had a number one hit and I was everywhere, like radio, TV. I was doing big shows for tens of thousands of people. And I had lost my last romantic relationship ended really tragically because, the girl I was dating got pregnant, we had a baby, and I just couldn't stop undermining my relationship. So I would sabotage every relationship that got serious.
Mm.
And she basically left and cut me off from my oldest daughter, Diana. And I was just heartbroken. I was literally clinically depressed at the time. So it was rock bottom for me, although I was peaking professionally. And I met this guy who was this Canadian pastor. And I had very little, I didn't want to have anything to do with Christianity, the Bible. Like to me, all of that was just superstition and it was just for stupid people, right? And I met this guy and he sort of told me about how he built his family based on sort of ancient wisdom, on scripture, and that it could be very different. And I saw it with my own eyes. And I'd never seen how to think uh, a marriage that struck me as, oh, I want that. That's what I want. So when I saw it in his life, I basically just turned to him. We're literally having dinner at his house, and I said, how can I get what you have?
Mm.
And he said, I'll teach you. And he taught me, and I've been now married for 25 years. Happy marriage, and it all worked out.
So he taught you.
He did. He did. He did. That's why I believe in coaching, is, one person can change your life in very meaningful ways.
If your girlfriend back then wouldn't cut you from your child, do you think you would turn into Christianity?
I don't think so. No, I had too much arrogance.
Hmm.
I had too much pride. Um, I think I had to be humbled. I think I would have eventually maybe turned to it because the same thing that caused that thing would have caused something else, right? The same flaw of character that I had, and I had quite a few flat sides. I was very, very good at some things, but very bad at others. And usually, I think that's what catches up with us. You can be extremely talented as a human being, very successful in whatever business, the arts, and usually extremely talented, extremely driven people have serious flat sides. And I really believe that if you want to achieve at a higher level, you need to address the blind sides
Hmm.
that you have, the weaknesses that you have. And most people don't. And it's a limiting factor. They hit a ceiling that they usually can't overcome. It's very hard to do so.
Do you think it is possible to learn in an easy way, not in a hard way?
Yeah, I think learning from other people is the easy way. The hard way is learning from your own stupid mistakes that hurt you every single time. The easy way is to seek wisdom and get coaching and training and to really invest in your personal development. That's the easy way. Now, it's still not easy, but that's definitely the easy way compared to, you know, harvesting the bitter harvest of bad behavior, right? The consequences of your behavior.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What is the first memory of your childhood that comes to your mind right now?
Oh, I know exactly what it is. I'm 5 years old. I'm standing outside of a concentration camp where my dad was. And I know it's my first childhood memory because I don't have photos from that thing, but I have it very clear in my mind that we were in Chile. There was a military coup, a fascist military coup. They overthrew the president. They proceeded to imprison tens of thousands of people, put them in secret prisons, concentration camps, things like that. And they put them in soccer stadiums at the time because they were big enough to contain a bunch of people. So
Yeah.
my dad, got taken from his home by people with machine guns and put in that place. And my mom and my sister and I, we were in hiding because they were looking for sort of Soviet citizens out there and stuff like that. So she had a fake passport, and all of that, all of those things. But she did come to his concentration camp and try to get a soldier, one of the guards, to pass food. Like he had a little bag, she had a little bag. That was sort of my first memory. And she was trying to talking to a soldier and say, "Hey, there's this guy inside. Here's his name. Can you pass this food to him?" So that was my first childhood memory. And then the next is being in a refugee facility because he was released, and then we were entered, admitted into a UN refugee facility where we were at least protected from the military. And I have a lot of memories from there, just playing around, hanging out with my friends. You make friends right away, right? Even in a bad place like that. And I have no photos, but I really have vivid memories from those times.
How do you make friends in places like that?
You're a kid. You make places everywhere you go. Immediately, you start playing games together. I was playing Tarzan with them because they showed us a movie, a black and white movie of Tarzan. So we were climbing trees and doing the yelling, the Tarzan yell. Uh-huh.
Who was the best Tarzan back then?
I think I was the best Tarzan. I'm convinced of that. I could climb trees like crazy.
What do you think changes when people are growing up? So as kids, you can easily connect with others just by playing games. What changes when you are an adult?
I think you become more self-aware. You become aware of hierarchies and politics, and you've been already sort of hurt, and you just lose that joy. You also lose creativity. That's another thing. You lose imagination. It's part of the reason why the public school system, um, which I mean, I was educated in a public school system, so I turned out fairly creative anyway. But it doesn't help you be creative. That's sort of the point, right? It gets educated out of you, because they basically teach you to conform to the conveyor belt, conform how you should do, what you should never do, and to sit down and shut up, and listen to the teacher. And they'll give you tests, and the tests have no connection whatsoever with the comprehension, with your ability to understand life better. It's just a test for a score, to give you that score. And there's all kinds of things that life teaches you, right? Society teaches you, not just the school system. But you sort of stop being creative, stop being this sort of easygoing person, eventually, and it's harder to connect with people.
How did you save your creativity while going through this schooling public system?
I honestly was lucky because I spent probably the most formative years of my life in Mozambique in Africa, before we went back to the Soviet Union. By the time we came back to the Soviet Union, I was already a formed individual. So I was really bored in high school there, but I was already formed as a human being, right? And in Africa, we went to the school that was it was an Oxford system English school, international school. Everything was in English. And we didn't have uniforms. I don't remember having homework even, to be honest with you, right?
Hmm.
And on top of that, we had a very free-flowing lifestyle, right? So we were completely unattended, unsupervised. Like, I mean, I would go to school, just take my bike to school. Like, there's nobody give me a ride or anything like that. And then I'll take my bike back. And then after school, I would grab a bite and I would go play with my friends, literally until it was dark outside. And no one knew where I was. So that gives you a lot of freedom, a lot of joy, a lot of freedom, a lot of sort of um, real life, experiencing life for real, not behind the desk. And then I think on top of that as well, it's the travel, right? The exposure to different cultures. I learned 4 languages by age 9. That gives you a whole lot of creativity. So being exposed to different music, different cultures, different people, all of those things together give you a much broader sort of horizon, I think. So I was just very lucky to be, in a way, in a strange way, I was in exile and we're running away from violence and danger, but we were very lucky in that sense that I had an uncharacteristically high level of imagination, creativity, flexibility, all of the things that happened there. We also didn't have screens. distracting us. And that's another thing, is that literally where we were in Mozambique, we didn't have TV, period.
No.
Like we just didn't have it until like probably a couple of years before I left already. They started like a local TV station that was horrible and went for like 2, 3 hours in the evenings. And my dad got a TV set, and he built this massive antenna on top of the house to capture TV shows from neighboring countries, quite literally, with like pretty bad reception. So we got shows from Swaziland, which was like a kingdom, and from South Africa. And that's when we started learning about American cultures and shows and things like that that were streaming at the time, or broadcasting at the time. They were not streaming. But before that, my imagination was you're shaping your imagination if you read books and if you have real life interaction with the world. So I traveled. I spent a lot of time on beaches, traveling, climbing, diving in this tropical place. I played. I learned languages. I read books every day. And because you don't have passive entertainment, you have to engage your imagination. So I would read Jules Verne, and I would read The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. I would read The Jungle Book.
Hmm.
All day long, if you spend 2, 3 hours a day reading, which I did, your imagination really develops.
I'm curious, when you count in your mind, what language do you count on?
Okay, this is a great question because I'll tell you a story how I found out. I didn't even realize that.
Hmm.
I was at the gym in the US here in Austin, and I'm in my headset listening to music, and I'm doing squats. And this young man comes by, and he just stares at me, and I'm like, what does he want? So I take off one of my headsets. I go, what's up? And he goes, are you Russian? And I'm like, how do you know? I don't even look Russian. He goes, you're counting in Russian. I said, really? Under your breath, under your breath.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I didn't know that. He goes, that's crazy. So basically, I count in Russian, but if I want to say the alphabet, I do the alphabet in Spanish
Hmm.
because my grandma taught me the alphabet phonetically in Spanish. So in any language, the order of the Latin letters are always in my mind in Spanish, basically. So yeah, that's the answer.
How did your parents react when you spoke with your sister in English?
Oh, I mean, that was just normal for us because we always use the language that describes better what we're trying to say in at the dinner table. So my dad would say something in Spanish, and then my mom would answer him in Russian. And no, I mean, everybody thought it was normal. And then my sister and we could speak in Portuguese, and everybody spoke all those languages. And then if we didn't want my parents to understand, then they would switch to English. And then my mom and dad, they spoke French, both of them did. So they would say something in French to each other if they don't want us to understand what they're talking about. So that was our dinner table conversation. And it was just for us, that was a normal conversation. In fact, we could mix two languages in one sentence sometimes because there's this one word that fits better, what we're trying to describe. So we could say something in Portuguese and then one word, we could say it in Russian, for example. So that was just a normal occurrence in our household, and nobody thought it was strange.
So, four languages: English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Russian. And as Chekhov said, as many languages you know, as many times you're a human. So, did it make you 4 times a human?
I think it does. I think they have studies actually. They have studies about how your ability to think multidimensionally is actually affected by if you speak more than one language. So to one degree or another, I really think Chekhov is right because language is how you make sense of the world. It really colors your worldview, the terminology you use, right? And languages have characters. They have an energy to them that is just different. So if you're able to switch from one energy to another, switch from one worldview and point of view almost of interpreting reality to another, I really believe that adds almost like a layer of intelligence, I guess, multidimensional intelligence, I would say. But there are really good studies about that are out there that are very real. You can measure this stuff, I guess.
I'm asking because I'm me myself. I know like Russian, Ukrainian, English,
Hmm.
Polish, and I'm learning 10 more languages. And I just love seeing how the world unfolds because,
Yes.
like I'm just driving by some I don't know, doner kebab thing, or I'm just purchasing some Chinese tea and I can understand what is written on the box, like in this Chinese
Yeah.
hieroglyph, or I can understand like this Arabian alphabet. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
Does it work that way? And I'm curious, have you ever thought about learning some more languages?
I did actually tried. I wanted to, and I was too lazy to do so because 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 I realized in college, actually, when I went to college in Moscow, they one of the thing was a foreign language. And I could easily, I think it would have been probably French if I'd chosen it. But I realized very soon that I had to actually do work to learn the language. And for me, it was almost like a deal breaker because I had learned all four languages without any work whatsoever because I was a child. I absorbed it from the ether, right, through my
Yeah.
pores. And it was so easy and so fluid to me because it was done by immersion. So when I realized, oh, you have to like make an effort, I said, no, thank you. And I basically took English as a foreign language in college and I spoke it better than the teacher. So it was terrible. I do regret that, by the way. So don't do that.
But still, it was like an easier way, to get through all this college thing.
Yes. Yeah, it was easy. It was like that was probably my only A in the whole all of college was English. I was not a very good student.
I in one of the interviews you told that I was always sort of a foreigner, and I'm curious, when was the first time you felt within your people? I mean, like felt at home.
I think to the highest degree that I can describe it, probably America. And I think and the reason for that is because you can be from somewhere else and still be American. Culturally, you're accepted as an American, even if you're from some other place. I think most other countries, because they were not founded by immigrants from the beginning, you're still, a Russian living in France, right? Or Ukrainian living in Poland, or there's still a separation of sorts. In America, I don't think you don't feel that at the very least. You're very much accepted as an American,
Yeah.
and almost maybe also not just as an American, but you're accepted as um, a cosmopolitan person, and you feel at home in America because of it, right? Because everywhere I've been an outsider, right? And I'm in Africa. I'm not black, and so they call me white. Actually, in Africa they called me white, and I'm in America I'm not white. Actually, I'm brown skinned, right? So I look Latino. And if I go to Chile, I have the accent. I still have the Chilean accent, so they would know. I
Hmm.
go to Mexico, people go, "Oh, you're Chilean," right? It's really interesting how I retain the accent. But very soon, if I'm having a conversation with a local Chilean, you will see gaps in my vocabulary because I don't live there, right? I spent some time there, but not a lot. Or just change, they will see a cultural change shift that, oh, okay, you're sort of Chilean ethnically, but not culturally to the degree that we are. If I go to Russia, same thing. I just don't look like them. And Russia's very, white, to be honest with you. Um, so I look foreign, basically.
Yeah.
And it's not that I received a ton of racism or things like that. Not really. A little bit here and there from stupid people, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
But I think in America, you really do feel like you belong if you're a kid like me who is from everywhere. So I definitely felt more at home here than anywhere else.
How did you understand that you wanted to become a singer?
Uh, I was just I was a singer since I was 4 years old. I just didn't know that I could do it professionally. So since I was four, I had a voice, and my basically when we had visitors at home, my mom and dad would go, "Okay, Christian, go sing a song for our visitors." And like I would stand on a chair, I think, something like that, and I would sing a song. And I just had a nice voice from the beginning. And eventually, I I was I was in a little choir. We had a Latin choir in Mozambique. We sang for the president. I sort of have a thing for singing for presidents. And and then eventually, when we were back in Russia, I I got into dancing, into breakdancing at the time, and it all eventually became this. Oh, you have some mastery. You can actually do this on a very high level. But it was a very slow process until I realized, oh, I can do this professionally. I can compete with others. But it took some training as well. So by that time, I was part of a jazz club, vocals. I was studying vocals in a jazz. It's like an after school program for a few years, and that helped me tremendously with just understanding music, the dimensionality, that whole world of jazz, blues, and then R&B and all of that. That whole taste came from the jazz club. I just exposed to people like Ray Charles and Al Jarreau and George Duke, the classics of jazz music. And that really enriched my palate, I guess, my taste. And I eventually met some of them, which was really cool. Some of those people that I grew up listening to. And then I also had a vocal teacher who was, he drove me crazy because he had his school of teaching was opera.
Hmm.
And it was the best. I was the luckiest man. And the thing is, to my shame, I don't remember even his name because I was with him maybe like a year and a half, maybe 2 years. It was a private tutor. I don't know. I don't even remember how I found him, but I just remember hating every minute of being with him because he he helped me develop the muscles, the actual mastery of how to use your instrument, your voice,
Hmm.
your vocal cords, how to warm them up, how to resonate, how to breathe. It was just very not fun. And so he had me do scales up and down and up and down and up and down with it. And I just hated it. Oh, so badly. And then I was so grateful eventually because he, he built my professional backbone when it
Hmm.
comes to voice because I had the technique, you know, with him. Very, very serious school of technique. So when now you're playing sports arenas and you're doing a 2 hour live show, if you don't have technique, you'll lose your voice immediately. Like in 15 minutes, you'll lose your voice. But if you have technique, you can sing for an hour and a half, you know. And it was only thanks to him and the apprenticeship I had with him that I was able to do so.
So coming back to breakdancing, how did you feel when it was included in the Olympics?
I was so happy. That was a big thing. Yeah, I mean, because for me, it was I was part of the subculture, in the 80s. This is how long it was, ago. It was like Soviet Union. Like there was nothing like that happening. And it was a delay of probably 5 to 7 years after it became popular in the US, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, and maybe 5 years or something like that. And I just watched the video. I remember how I fell in love with it. I watched a video there's two films. One was called Breaking,
Hmm.
and people moved there, and I couldn't understand that this was not special effects, you know. And then I watched another one called Beat Street, and it was basically about almost like the birth of hip hop in New York and Brooklyn. And I was immediately sold, immediately. And I started practicing, and then I found this one that there was a one club in Moscow that had breakdancing. And it was
Wow.
like, and this is in the Soviet Union. They didn't have clubs, basically. So it's like the Soviet version of a club. They closed at midnight, basically. It's not even a club, right? But that particular one was sort of progressive, and they had breakdancers once a week could dance there. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. So I showed up and there's lines. You have to stand in line for 2 hours to get in. It was so popular with the
Wow.
group because it was a very progressive, very unique. I mean, in Russia there was nothing. Okay, it was the most boring place on earth, Soviet Union. And so I met breakdancers, like real breakdancers there. And I said, how can I, heck, I want to join you. How can I, where can I learn? And they had like these two literally underground groups that practiced all week long in like these, um, literally this underground places, like terrible
Yeah.
places with some mirrors and some cardboard. And you would go there during the week, and then on the weekends you would go dance somewhere on like a or like a promenade in Moscow where there's people just hanging out on the weekend, and that's how you show off your skills. And it was literally a subculture, very very small. I think they might have been 150 of us total for the country. Like that's it. That's all there is. And I was one of those people. So, and that's how I trained and trained and trained. And eventually it evolved into sort of a much more sophisticated choreographed stuff that I now started developing for myself. I started choreographing much more complex pieces. And when I started my career, I recruited breakdancers for it. And of course, they're street dancers. They improvise. They're not used to choreography. So I had to literally teach them all on how to do what I want to do from nothing, you know. And so when we came out for the first time, everybody was like, "Who are these people? Like, it doesn't exist," you know. So that we were very much above the competition because of the kind of work we put in together and how we mixed things, you know. So yeah, that was our competitive edge. So it actually added tremendously to my ability to succeed quickly.
And it also sounds like a very brave thing to do, do something that
Yeah.
nobody really does.
Oh, totally. You stand out like crazy. Yeah. Yeah. They hated us. You know, there was literally when you go on the weekends and you want to break dance somewhere, there would be other subgroups, like subculture groups, like the rockers and people like that, that would want to actually beat you up. It was actually a real thing. They had fights and everything. It was pretty
Yeah.
like look at it go. That's so stupid, but that was our reality at the time. You know.
So you've played for thousands and even to a 500,000 audience on bigger events. And I'm curious, have you ever been afraid of failing?
You know, you mean in a performance specifically?
Do
That
something wrong, take the wrong note, say the wrong words, something like that.
Oh, I would forget lyrics all the time, you know, on tour. Seriously, and my band actually, I don't know why I'm very bad with lyrics, and I would write. These are lyrics that I wrote, right? So I would forget my own lyrics, and my band would actually take bets, not if I would forget the lyrics, but how many times during a show I would forget lyrics. That's how bad it was. So, but you know, when you have a big show and there's like 1,000 people screaming, no one really notices, you know. So I just fake a word because I forgot what it is, and but I don't think, to answer your question, I don't think I was afraid.
Hmm.
There was something in me. I mean, that's probably part of my ability to be successful is that I really didn't have that paralyzing fear. I don't know why. You know, I think I developed a mindset. I mean, that's some of the things that I do in my performance coaching is how to develop that kind of mindset. Eh, and I work with high achievers because all of them have deal with fear, every single one of them. And I remember the first time I did a show that was televised. I just remember it very, very clearly. And we had trained for months and months and months. And I trained very hard with my band. I trained them very hard because I wanted to be the best, right? So, and they were the best actually. They stood out immediately. But I remember that show, and it was a televised show, and there was probably, I don't know, 5 to 10 people, 10,000 people in the sports arena of this big show. We were just one of the many artists that were there, and um, all of them were literally sick to their stomach, nervous, all of them, because it was the first time. And I did not have that. I was just sure that we're gonna crush it, and we did. You know, that was sort of our best. So I sort of had developed that quality, that mindset of extreme confidence during performances. So I didn't experience a lot of fear, no.
Why did you want to be the best?
I just, I think I don't think you can explain it. I think there are people that are high achievers have a drive. It's just an internal machine, like an engine inside of you that wants you to be at the peak of your profession. And some people have it, some people don't. I think a lot of it, because I work with high achievers quite a bit. My theory is that it's a mix of giftedness and passion. I think mastery has something to do with it. Like if you become good at something, you really care more and you start investing more and more and more. And some of it usually comes from a dark place as well. So it's
Mm.
one of the things that I do with people that I work with is help them purify the fuel they're running on, you know, because they have a lot of fuel. They'll go places, they'll make more money, they'll found that company, they'll write the book, but the fuel is mixed. So if the fuel is mixed and you have both good fuel and bad fuel driving you forward, you'll probably succeed, but you'll definitely hit a wall sooner rather than later. If you purify your fuel, your motivation, what drives you to do this, you will succeed for much longer and on a higher level, basically. So for me, I had a mixed fuel as well, just like everybody else. And part of it was I was inspired by the artists who inspired me, and I wanted to be at the very as close as possible to their level of expertise and mastery. And the bad fuel was I really wanted to be loved and accepted,
Mm.
and I wanted the guarantee of that. And I think that my theory is that that bad fuel stemmed from, growing up in new places over and over and over again and not fitting in.
Yeah.
So what do you do if you really desperate, you feel like an outsider everywhere and you want to fit in? You learn how do you become popular so that people accept you. That's what you do, and that's bad fuel. That doesn't that will take you to a certain place, but don't it's not going to take you far, unfortunately.
Is there ever a peak for high achievers, or is it always a journey?
I think so. I think there are peaks in. I mean, there's studies around that it depends on the space you're in. For example, in athletics, the peak there's a certain age where you peak. In the sciences, there's an age where you peak. In other things, it just varies from discipline to discipline. But I think there for sure are peaks of creativity. And as a matter of fact, there's a really, really, really good work done around that where essentially they de define two types of intelligence. It's fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence. So when you're younger, you have a lot of fluid intelligence, right? That's why most of some of the best artists on the planet that write songs, they wrote the songs that are iconic for decades and generations, all in their 20s,
Hmm.
most of them. And that curve, that's the fluid intelligence. You can invent something completely new out of nothing. It was the same thing with me. And eventually that curve starts declining slowly. And maybe it declines probably around 30, 35 starts declining. But a new curve emerges it overlaps. It's called crystallized intelligence.
Hmm.
And that is basically the ability to recognize patterns in how things relate to each other. In other words, wisdom,
Hmm.
the ability how things go together, right? So that's why the great leaders or orchestra conductors or film directors, the people that basically have to unify a diverse, almost orchestra of things, they reach their peak. They don't reach their peak until they're in their 40s and 50s, because that's crystallized intelligence capabilities. It's a different type of creativity.
I have one of the previous guests' question for you. Who is someone from your life who has had an unlikely impact on you and why?
I think of my first that missionary, Canadian missionary, was the biggest in my adult life impact, because he came into my life when I was enjoying extraordinary success professionally. And it was very clear to me that I can't sustain that kind of success without making big changes in my character, you know? And the fact that I met him, that I listened to him, that it really completed my my level of maturity so quickly. It accelerated my development, was probably the most significant thing. And I mean, that's part of the reason why I do what I do. Part of what I do is coaching, is because every person who wants to achieve something needs a guide, you know. I mean, and that's why you have that person in theater, in movies. You have the Yoda, right? You have Mr. Miyagi in Karate Kid. You know, you always have the sage somewhere who is behind the hero. And the hero can't really become the hero unless that person has a mentor that guides him through that sort of hard time, that messy middle of life. And I think so that's very evident in mythology and storytelling in the human condition, and I think that's true of every single one of us. Everybody needs a guide, I think.
And I know I personally still feel so hard to find your Yoda, because in the movies and in the books and everywhere, they're just there. You're not searching for them. They just happen to find you.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a little bit of a difference in life.
Oh, it's very, very hard. I agree. It's actually not easy at all. You have to really work for it. You have to really want it, and you have to earn it. You have to earn their time and their attention. So yeah, I agree.
Christian, I wish to have the sky as the limit to our conversation, but time is the limit. So let's jump to the rapid fire questions.
Go for it.
So, sing or dance?
Sing.
Hot or cold?
Hot.
What are your favorite color and song?
My favorite color is my favorite song, Purple Rain by Prince.
If you were a superhero, what superpower would you have?
Understanding human nature.
Who do you learn from? Name just one person.
My wife, Deb.
Name two people whom I should definitely reach out to and have this conversation with.
Reach out to David Yeager. He's a lead researcher in growth mindset in the world. Reach out to him. Will you get him? That's a whole separate conversation.
Yeah, at least I can try.
You can try. Yeah, you can do that. Who else? Reach out to Arthur C. Brooks. He's the author of From Strength to Strength. This is a book he wrote, which basically describes what I was telling you about the fluid intelligence and the crystallized intelligence, the first and the second wave. That's a great person to have on the show as well.
It was a fun story about reaching out. I tried to reach out to Dwayne The Rock Johnson and Simon Sinek, and I did receive a very nice reply from their teams that they're busy, and I totally get it. So not now, but I will definitely keep trying. Ask it forward. It's like pay it forward, but with questions. So ask a question future guest will have to answer.
Talk to yourself, to a younger self, in a pivotal moment of your younger life. What was that time, and what would you say to yourself, to your younger self in that moment?
Is there one question that I definitely should have asked you, but didn't?
No, I think you asked some really good questions.
I still have a ton of questions, but as I've said, I wish to have the sky's the limit, but time is the limit. So Christian, thank you very much for this open conversation. And thank you for giving me this possibility to dive just a little, to have this small sneak peek into your life journey. And thank you very much for allowing me to learn from you and to get to know you just a little better as a human being.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for having a show dedicated to just stories and human beings.
Thank you very much. And yeah, see you in the community world.